Hello, everybody. We're just doing a systems check to make sure that the sound works and all the technical things are functioning. Looks like a few of you have gathered already. Thank you. I want to tell you just a couple things about what's going to happen tonight. This is a very stripped down production. If production isn't even the word, this is a stripped down presentation of polar bears. It's been running just under 90 minutes, and that includes an intermission. We are taking a break at about 2/3 of the way through, maybe right around an hour. So get yourself something to drink and settle in. We'll have about 5 minutes of an intermission at that point where you can replenish your drinks and go do whatever you got to do. And that's that. So we hope that you enjoy this. We had our matinee at 4 o'clock Pacific time anyway. Some people from the East Coast were watching, so it wasn't a matinee for them. I just want to point out too that this show had its world premiere in a full production at Main Stage West Theater, in a production directed by Sherry Lee Miller. And Main Stage West is, like most theaters, they're really struggling right now. And one thing that you can do, both to help them and just if you're interested in a very different kind of writing that I've done, is right now, if you go to mainstagewest.com, you will see a place where you can click on a special holiday show that they're doing. It's a variety show that has been pre-put together, and it's just streaming for free to click on. And one of the many things that takes place during that, lots of music, comedy, personal stories, all kinds of things. I do a reading of my comic horror Christmas story, Crumbs at Midnight. That pops in at around the 35-minute point. It's a long show packed with all kinds of good stuff. So I suggest you check that out and help out Main Stage West. Okay, it is about 7:24. I am going to step away. We will come back just before 7:30, and we will present Polar Bears. Thanks for being here. All right, hello. Thanks to everybody who has logged on to watch this presentation of my play Polar Bears. It seemed like a good time to share this story. This play had its world premiere in a full production 5 years ago, had another production the next year at Sonoma Arts Live. First one was Main Stage West. Last couple of years, there have been other productions at other theaters. Last year, it was at Left Edge Theater with another actor. And this year, there was going to be a production in another state, and it didn't get to happen because of everything going on. It's been postponed until next year. So it just seemed like it would be nice to share the story one way or another. So we decided to tinker with some new technology, new to me anyway. And this is going to be an extremely no bells and whistles performance, just me telling the story, as well as I have gotten it memorized. I may have to ask for a line here and there. That's just kind of part of how we're doing it. We're just gonna have fun. I'm just gonna share the story. So for those of you who just logged on, I mentioned a little bit ago when we were doing a systems check, there will be a break partway through, about an hour, maybe just before, the break will happen at about an hour, but it will last about 5 minutes. And then we'll come back for the rest of the story. So thank you all for joining us. And here we go. This is Polar Bears. I never wanted to have kids. I didn't think it'd be fair, to them. The way I figured it, a kid deserved a parent who was parental. But me, everyone always said I was immature, unpredictable, spur of the moment, a dreamer, a goofball, a screw up, a mess. And that's the people who liked me. So I decided I would never have kids. And then I got one. I was so depressed. When Gladys, my first wife, told me she was pregnant, I was certain the kid was doomed. But Gladys was optimistic. She wanted kids. She was 34. Her clock was ticking. If I had a clock, it was lost, broken, or buried under the seat cushions of my pickup truck. All I could hear was that scared little voice warning me how completely unready I was for fatherhood. Okay. On the positive side, the mature side, I had a good job, working swing shift at a small newspaper in the suburbs, mostly production, but with the occasional writing assignment. And I had a really nice apartment in this cool old building that used to be a whorehouse. On the downside, the immature side, well, for one thing, I used to spend my summers running a game booth at the Renaissance Fair where people paid money to throw mud at my face. And that was my idea. Gladys tried to convince me that my immaturity made me the perfect candidate for fatherhood, since I'd have so much in common with our children. The one thought, the only thought that gave me a glimpse of comfort and an idea of a world in which me and fatherhood might work out, that one thought was Christmas. To be specific, Santa Claus. I had very strong ideas about Santa Claus. I had a strong, almost visceral connection to the holidays in general. Cinnamon, gingerbread, just cut pine trees, leaving sticky, smelly sap on your fingers. The smell of musty, wet sidewalks on a cold winter's day. The sound of wrapping paper tearing. The sound of skates cutting into ice, like they're telling you a secret. Shh. I love that sound. I love Christmas. And Santa Claus? Here's the thing. My earliest memory of Santa Claus is the Christmas morning that I stopped believing in Santa Claus. I remember sitting there on the floor in front of the tree, my little brain putting two and two together as I became aware that all the presents from Santa Claus, the Rock'em Sock'em Robot, Farm Animal See and Say, they'd all been wrapped in the exact same wrapping paper, polar bear wrapping paper, that all the other stuff was wrapped in. All the presents from my parents to the rest of the family. That moment, me sitting there in my Batman pajamas, it was like watching a popsicle in a frying pan. I could actually feel my belief in Santa melting away. Melting into a hot, sticky syrup, a thick, sugary disappointment. I mean, I might not have been the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but Jesus Christ, Mom and Dad, how hard would it have been to get a different wrapping paper for all the stuff from Santa? I read this study once in a magazine. A bunch of child psychologists in Canada studied like 5,000 kids, charting their development from birth to adolescence. And one of the things that they figured out was that most kids stop believing in Santa between the ages of 7.5 and 11. Now, if a kid stops believing on the early end of that, it's usually because an older kid, often a sibling, breaks the bad news. But if they somehow make it to 9 or 10 with their faith intact, then it's over the next couple of years that they reach the proper stage of cognitive development where they're able to come to their own conclusions about Santa Claus. In other words, they get old enough to figure it out between the ages of 7.5 and 11. Me, I was 4. Look, I'm not saying I was traumatized or anything. I really wasn't. Santa or no Santa, I kept getting presents. The world kept turning. The trees still went up every year, all covered in lights and ornaments. The exquisite thrill of the holidays still went on. But from that moment, I always wondered what it would have been like to have kept my faith alive, to have continued to feel that magic until I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7.5. And I always knew that if I ever had kids, I'd be careful. I'd avoid making the kind of mistakes that force a kid to stop believing in Santa before they're ready, before they're cognitively developed enough to do it on their own. I'd be the kind of parent who made their kids' Christmas as magical as Christmas can be. For one thing, I'd avoid wrapping Santa's presents in everyday wrapping paper. Santa doesn't need wrapping paper, right? If I ever had kids, that would be my rule number 1. Santa never wraps his presents. Santa's presents just appear. When my daughter Jenna was born, she was beautiful and rubbery and kind of weird, and I loved her immediately. But because she was born in February, I had 10 whole months to wait until my first Christmas as a dad, and nearly 2 years to wait until she'd be cognitively developed enough to appreciate the idea of a magical man and his flying reindeer dropping toys down the chimney in the middle of the night. By then, my rule number one had expanded. It had become a whole list of rules. I wrote them down for Gladys. The Santa rules. Rule number one, Santa never wraps his presents. Rule number two, no matter how late it is on Christmas Eve or how tired the parents are, Santa's gifts never make the move from the garage to the Christmas tree until I have determined that the kid is in deep REM sleep. Rule number three, if the kid has left a snack for Santa and Santa has not eaten all of it, the remains are never thrown in the trash where the kid can find them. Leftovers must be flushed down the toilet. Rule number four, Santa never delivers unassembled presents. And if a gift from Santa does require some assembly, all packing material in which that item arrived must also be disposed of somewhere the kid will never find it, preferably the trash can of a family at least 2 blocks away. Look, this is all just common sense. When my kid stopped believing, it wasn't going to be because she found half a gingerbread man she decorated for Santa in the trash with some coffee grounds and an old Brillo pad. It wasn't going to be because I got sloppy with the details. Anyway, there were a whole lot of other rules, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of them designed to let Jenna believe in Santa just as long as she wanted to believe in Santa. But by the time she was 3 years old, it became clear to me that she was kind of a skeptic. I mean, she loved the idea of Santa, but she was just brutal in the way she saw through things, testing anything she didn't understand, asking constant questions. And some of those questions led directly to the immediate and spontaneous invention of brand new Santa rules. Daddy, is Santa Claus a ghost? No. But why would you think Santa's a ghost? Because live people aren't supposed to go into the fireplace when there's a fire in it. That's true. Don't ever go anywhere near the fireplace when there's a fire in it. But no, Santa's not a ghost. He's Santa. And that's why on Christmas Eve, we always put out the fire in the fireplace at 7 p.m. So it's nice and cool when Santa comes down the chimney. Rule number 11. On Christmas Eve, no fires in the fireplace after 7 p.m. Daddy, how does Santa fit down the chimney if he's so big? Well, he's so heavy and his bag of toys is so heavy, he just falls down the chimney. Kaboom. It's the law of gravity. Then how does he go back up? He doesn't. He leaves through the window. Daddy, if Santa leaves through the window, won't there be boot prints outside in the garden by the window? Yeah. So what do you say on Christmas morning? You and I go out there and see those boot prints for ourselves. Rule number 12. On Christmas morning, there will be a trail of boot prints outside the window by the garden, not tennis shoe prints, boot prints. And under no circumstances can the boots used to make those tracks be the same shoe size as me or anyone who lives in the house, because the kid will go through all the shoes in the closet and compare them to the Santa tracks. The thing is, I really did believe that all parents were doing this kind of thing, doing whatever it takes to imbue the holidays with a sense of mystery and enchantment and magic. And you know what? It worked. Doubts and all, questions or no questions, Jenna kept on believing for a few more years anyway. Yeah, Jenna believed in Santa right up until her mother died. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Regardless of my lifelong fear of fatherhood, I discovered that I liked being a dad. It was good, and I was possibly a little better at it than I thought I'd be. I started to believe that me and fatherhood, we were going to work out. Me and Gladys, not so much. Everything that was good about us was eventually crushed under the weight of everything that wasn't. And by the time divorce papers changed hands, we'd had another kid, Andy, born on the 4th of July. Both of my kids were born on the 3rd floor of a hospital that had clearly been designed by people who had only ever built prisons. Seriously, the delivery room was as cold, gray, and unwelcoming as the visitor's room at San Quentin. The whole hospital was like that. Even the gift shop was frightening. The one exception was the nursery. After they were born and inspected and de-umbilicaled, after they were washed and pajamaed and introduced to their mother's breast, Jenna and Andy, born 17 months apart, were carried next door to the nursery, where they were cocooned in a warm, softly lit dormitory of little cribs, all the babies wrapped in flower-patterned blankets. There was an enormous plate glass window with soft yellow blinds looking out onto a 3rd floor open-air viewing platform. For specific 2-hour periods, 3 times a day, those blinds would be open for the benefit of anyone waiting outside on the viewing platform. They would look through the window at the tight little columns of swaddled babies. Eagerly, they'd read the names on all the cribs, pointing when they saw the name they were looking for. Tiffany, Julia, Daniel, Jasper, Jenna, Andy. Jenna and Andy. My kids. After the divorce and my move to a town 45 miles away, Gladys and I agreed that I should be there every morning before she left for her job as an insurance underwriter in the city, so I could take care of the kids. That was her job, insurance. Gladys wrote the policy on the Hubble Space Telescope. It was her proudest moment as an insurance professional. Me, I still had my swing shift job at the newspaper, working 3 to midnight. So every morning at sunrise, I would sleepily drive to my kids' house, going right past that hospital where I'd seen their little faces for the first time. I think about that often. Zipping down the freeway in my pickup at 6 in the morning, completely aware of the irony that a guy who'd never wanted kids was now totally crazy about his own. Thinking about him, making up plans of things to do with him, worrying about them all the time. And one of the things I worried about a lot, of course, was Christmas. I mean, what if Gladys ignored the Santa rules? Or what if her parents, Elsa and Paul, accidentally gave a wrong answer to a Santa question? Or lit a fire in the fireplace after 7 p.m.? Or used wrapping paper in an unauthorized manner? See, the magic of Christmas is a fragile and delicate thing, and one clumsy move can shatter it in an instant, like a glass ornament you step on at midnight on Christmas Eve in bare feet while trying to open a window by the tree to make it look like Santa used it to leave the house. But that's another story. I read a different study once. The title was something like Parental insecurity and guilt identified as contributing factors in chronic paternal overcompensation and obsessive behavior frequently found in the fathers of children of divorce. Yeah, that was a fun read. It was suggested by certain friends and family and colleagues at the newspaper that my somewhat heightened concern regarding the kids might be tied in a bit with my own feelings of insecurity and guilt about suddenly being the father of two brand new children of divorce. After all, my parents split up when I was 5. I was raised as a child of divorce myself, so I probably, carried some gene for obsessive paternal overcompensation that some fathers have and maybe sometimes pass along to the recently divorced adult sons. It was my own dad, actually, who pointed out during one of our regular long distance phone conversations that I definitely maybe did need to, you know, chill out a little. Not that my dad ever would have said it quite like that. For one thing, my dad never said anything so succinctly. My dad was a man of many words. He believed that words of wisdom should never be delivered directly in short, concise declarations of fact, if they could also be delivered in a series of long, well rehearsed, and usually kind of true stories. My dad, like his dad before him, like both of his brothers, like all 3 of his sons, was a teller of tales. So when I called him up one evening to give him an update and share some of my worries and concerns, my dad, true to form, responded with a story. I don't know if you remember this, Davy. This is a few years after your mom and I split up. You were 7 or 8. It was probably spring, maybe summer. Went by the house to pick you and your brothers up for the day, and Stevie wanted to know what we were going to do. And I said I had no idea. So he decided to just do whatever your mom was doing, and you and Jeffy ran out and jumped in the lemon wagon, and away we went. My dad drove a yellow station wagon, a Ford. We called it the lemon wagon. So after a while driving down the road, we went by that great big old red billboard. You remember that billboard, Davy? The one that said, "Come on up to Santa's Village." Santa's Village. It was this little amusement park in the mountains about an hour from my dad's house. It was built 5 years before I was born, but it always seemed run down and a little bit seedy. Still, we loved its tiny candy cane houses, the bakery where you could get warm gingerbread cookies, the bobsled rides, the Ferris wheel, and the live reindeer that you could feed carrots to if you could stand to get close enough. Reindeer smell pretty foul, especially in warm weather. So we just turned right there and went on up to Santa's Village. And I don't remember what all we did, but we had a heck of a good time. And then we jumped back in the lemon wagon and I brought you home. Well, Stevie, poor little guy, when he saw you and Jeffy running up the driveway with your elf hats and your little candy canes, he was pretty bent out of shape that he'd missed out on getting to go to Santa's Village. My dad's stories didn't always have a clear ending or an obvious point, even when there was one. The thing is, Davy, I know you want to give your kids everything. You want them to be happy, and you should, but you can only do what you can do. You love them, and they know it, and that's enough, even when it feels like it isn't. In other words, I should chill out a little. So I did, successfully suppressing all urges to overcompensate for any perceived failings. And I stayed that way until right around October. With Christmas coming up in a few months, I had started to devise an idea, a way to bring a little extra Santa Claus magic to the kids' first Christmas Eve without dad in the house. It wouldn't be easy. For one thing, I only had the kids for the morning and part of the afternoon that day, but with the help of a few friends, plus a guy who ran a neighborhood used bookstore, another guy who curated an annual exhibit of Santa Claus outfits, the entire weekend crew of the local fire department, the leadership team of the local carpenters union, and a guy named Roberto, 6 hours would be just enough time. Even Gladys had a part to play. When I arrived to pick the kids up that morning, Andy leaped into my arms and elatedly informed me that his mother had just found something mysterious in the backyard. Dad, 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 dad. Mama found a letter from Santa. The letter, accompanied by a red cloth bag containing 2 little felt reindeer antler hats. The letter was the first of 5 clues, the beginning of a treasure hunt. A treasure hunt that would take Jenna, Andy, and me on a day-long adventure with one Christmas Eve wallop of an ending. All 5 notes, clues, were written in nice, clean, clear handwriting, carefully drawn by Roberto, a particularly interested and friendly artist in the ad department of the newspaper. Rule number 13. All letters, notes, and gift tags written as if from Santa Claus must be written not by any member of the family with identifiable handwriting, but by Roberto. See, many a childhood fantasy has been obliterated when a kid recognizes her parents' handwriting in a note from the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, leprechauns, friendly Halloween creatures, or Santa Claus. When leaving correspondence from a fictional character, unrecognizable handwriting is everything. That first clue sent us to a small, mysterious used bookstore where the kids were instructed to approach the counter with their little reindeer antler hats in place and to recite these words. Boo hoo, what can we do? We're 2 little reindeer without any clue. Upon hearing these words, the atmospherically gnomish bookseller was to respond with a line of his own. A clue? A clue. You know, I do believe I saw a clue inside one of my books. From high on a shelf in the back of the bookstore, he pulled down a copy of L. Frank Baum's Father Goose and presented it to the kids. Inside the book was a little gold envelope with the second clue. It sent us all the way across town to a big outdoor furniture store. Now, this being winter, when people don't buy a lot of outdoor furniture, the store always transformed itself into a Christmas emporium, the main attraction of which was a display of mannequins dressed in various authentic Santa Claus outfits representing all the Christmas-leaning countries of the world. Tucked inside the pocket of the Santa from Finland was the third clue. I really don't remember where the third clue sent us, but the destination of the fourth clue was the engine room of the downtown fire department. Boo-hoo! What can we do? We're 2 little reindeer without any clue. A clue? A clue? Yeah, I think I might have seen a clue around here somewhere. Oh, maybe it was on that big red fire truck over there. Why don't you 2 little reindeer climb on up onto that fire truck? Search every inch of it until you find your clue. Putting this together wasn't as complicated as it might sound. The minute I told people I was a recently divorced dad creating a treasure hunt for his kids on Christmas Eve, people's hearts and quite a few doors swung wide open. The fifth and final clue was found under a fireman's helmet in the cab of the truck. It sent us down the street to the ice cream parlor where the kids were instructed to get an ice cream and some hot chocolate and to wait until something very special happened. The place was full of people, shoppers, families, kids, and grandkids. Jenna and Andy were sitting at a table in the middle of the room with their back to the door when they heard it. Hoo, hoo, hoo! They pinwheeled around, and there he was, Santa Claus, aka John Wallace, the president of the local carpenters union, aka the white-bearded stepfather of my brother Jeff's girlfriend Laura. Merry Christmas, everyone! Ho, ho, ho! Now, well, recognizably Kris Kringle, this was a very blue-collar kind of Santa. John believed that on Christmas Eve, Santa would be at the North Pole making toys before deciding to take a break to surprise a couple of kids in an ice cream parlor. So when he walked in, he looked like he just walked out of the workshop. He had his work boots on, blue overalls, a bright red shirt. He had his carpenter's belt on with rows and rows of candy canes dangling like icicles. Pinned to his shirt was a button that said United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners, and another in Latin that said Labor omnia vincit, work conquers all. Now, who are these two little reindeer here? Wait, don't tell me. Don't tell me. You must be Jenna, and you must be Andy. I see you figured out all of my clues. And right on time, too. What good, smart little reindeer you are. I think such clever children deserve at least some of their presents a little early. Here's Mrs. Claus with some things we picked out just for you. Mrs. Claus, aka Lynn, aka my brother Jeff's future mother-in-law, appeared in the doorway with some large packages covered in bright gold wrapping paper, the remains of which I'd already disposed of in a trash can 2 blocks away from my apartment, where I'd wrapped those presents before taking them to my brother Jeff's house for John to pick up on his way to the ice cream parlor. You know, to tell you the truth, I don't remember what was in those packages. All I remember is the looks on my kid's face when John set them on the table. Andy couldn't even speak. He just kept staring up at Santa, a look of rapturous joy covering every inch of his face. Jenna, unsure what the protocol was for moments of this magnitude, decided to take the formal approach, extending her arm to shake Santa's hand. You are so kind and gentle, Santa. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho! John then started working the room, passing out candy canes from one end to the other. He turned to wave goodbye just before leaving through the back door with Lynn. Goodbye, little reindeer. Goodbye, everyone. And remember, if you are currently jobless, consider a career in carpentry and construction. Good jobs for good wages. Merry Christmas. And he was gone. I did it. I did it. I had just given my kids a Christmas Eve they would never forget. And I had also accidentally stumbled into a brand new Santa rule. Rule number 14. Until further notice, Jenna and Andy must never be taken to any family reunion or social gathering where John and Lynn are likely to make an appearance. You know, I knew it'd be difficult to ever surpass the success of that first Christmas. So I honestly never really tried. A careful observation of the Santa rules would be enough. And over the next few years, Christmas following Christmas, other holidays began to overlap with our family in significant ways. 4th of July was already Andy's birthday. And it was the day that I attended a 4th of July barbecue where I met Susan, who I would eventually marry. A geologist with a highly developed sense of wonder about the universe, but no measurable connection to Santa Claus. Susan couldn't even remember how old she was when she stopped believing in Santa. But she could tell you every detail of the day she first visited the Natural History Museum with her brownie troop. New Year's Day, that was our first date. And then there were the holidays that overlapped with various medical emergencies. Like the Valentine's Day, when Andy caught a weird, scary virus and had a temperature of 103. The St. Patrick's Day, when Jenna caught a baseball with her face and had to have surgery to fix her broken nose. And the Easter Sunday, when, as I was bringing the kids back from a day in the park, Gladys pulled me aside and told me that she'd just found a sore spot on her neck and near her lymph nodes. She was going to go to the doctor and have it checked out. It was lymphoma, fairly advanced, and she had lung cancer too. By Halloween, she'd had several rounds of chemo and 2 bouts of pneumonia and was pretty much losing the battle on all of it. That year, Susan and I took the kids trick-or-treating in their neighborhood while Gladys stayed home to hand out candy, dressed as a fortune teller, a bright yellow scarf covering her now hairless head. Gladys marked her 43rd birthday in the hospital and passed away 2 days before Thanksgiving. The kids knew their mom was sick, of course. I mean, how could they not? But Gladys never told them she was dying. Instead, hoping for a miracle, I guess, she kept promising them she'd get better, told them they could count on it, talked about all the things they'd do when she felt strong again, places they'd visit, even just going out for pizza at Chuck E. Cheese again, kids' favorite restaurant. Andy liked the video games. Jenna had a lot of hard questions about that talking rat. So they just kept waiting for their mom to get better. And I think in a way, so did she. I mean, Gladys was a fighter. Nobody knew that better than I did. I think that Gladys believed that if she ever told the truth, if she ever actually spoke the word terminal, actually heard herself saying that word to her children, then her fight would be over. Several weeks before she died, I had taken the kids to the zoo. They were spending more and more time with me as Gladys got sicker and sicker. Most weekends, they were staying over at the house I now shared with Susan. That day at the zoo, after lunch, we stopped for a while to watch the polar bears. Now, in front of us on the fence was a series of interesting polar bear facts. Hey, guys, look. Polar bears weigh between 750 and 1,500 pounds. Polar bears can swim up to 40 miles in the open sea at a speed of 4 miles per hour. Due to their inherent toughness and strength, polar bears can withstand long walks on the ice and freezing temperatures, aided by a layer of fat beneath their skin. Polar bear cubs are raised exclusively by the mother, who is abandoned by the father just hours after mating. Due to climate change and habitat loss, polar bears are officially an endangered species. Rawr, 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 rawr. Andy, on all fours now, was trying to capture the thick, tough, muscular, fat, insulated body language of the average polar bear, while Jenna stood there, continuing to study those interesting polar bear facts. Daddy, what's an endangered species? Oh, an endangered species is any group of animals that is in danger of becoming extinct. Extinct? Well, that means they're not alive anymore. It means they're all gone. Daddy, is mommy an endangered species? I really don't remember what I said to her, but I do remember thinking, this is too much. This is too big. How am I ever going to handle what's coming? And how am I ever going to break the word to them that what they were told they could count on wasn't exactly true? Gladys died on a Tuesday morning. I'd taken the kids out of school for a few days. And they were over at our house. And that morning, I could see them in the back room playing on the floor when the phone call came in the kitchen from Debbie, Gladys's little sister. Susan stood nearby, her face a question that already knew the answer. I could not tell the kids right away. I needed a plan. Susan stayed with the kids as I went for a walk to try to figure out how to do this. Okay, maybe I should bring them something nice, something sweet to, undercut the sadness when I tell them donuts. No, donuts are too run of the mill. How about a cake? No, too macabre. Cakes are for birthdays, not death days. I finally settled on some really good, really expensive chocolate truffles. You could buy a whole box of donuts for what those truffles cost. That's how sweet they were. Back at the house, I called the kids over to the old gray steamer trunk that we used as a coffee table. Hey guys, so I have some bad news. I let them each pick a truffle, and they had them half eaten before I could force myself to break the news that I knew would break their hearts. So, you know how your mom has been really sick lately, and she's been fighting really hard to get better. Well, this morning, she just couldn't fight anymore, and she passed away. She died. Your mama died. I'm so sorry. They didn't even stop chewing. My strongest memory of this moment is just their little faces, their eyes suddenly wide and overflowing with tears, their little mouths chewing their chocolate the whole time. There were a lot of hugs and lots more tears and a whole lot of questions. Jenna was still sobbing when she took Buddy, the cat, into the bathroom to break the bad news in private. Andy was the first to stop crying and start trying to wrap his head around this monumental betrayal of all that was fair and right. He was so sad, but he was also angry. Why did mommy lie? Mommy lied. She promised. She promised she'd get better. She said we get to go to Chuck E. Cheese all together again. She said, but she lied. You know, the wonderful thing about kids is that for a while anyway, They believe the things we tell them. One definition of innocence could be a state of not knowing that people will lie to you. And we do lie to kids, mostly for good reason, mostly to protect, to comfort and console, to entertain and amuse. But the reason doesn't make them feel any better when they finally learn the truth. That afternoon, as a distraction, Susan and I took the kids to the movies. We picked The Santa Claus, with an E at the end. It's the Disney movie with Tim Allen as a divorced dad who accidentally kills Santa Claus and is then contractually obligated to take his place, becoming a better man and a better dad in the process. About 15 minutes into the movie, when Santa slips and falls off a roof to his death, I was sitting there thinking, oops, should have picked a different movie. Should have taken the kids to see The Lion King again. That's still in the movie theaters. But wait, no, in that one, Simba's dad dies. What is it with Disney movies? But after a while, the kids got into it. Somehow they were able to stop crying and start laughing. Say what you will about it being a B movie. That afternoon, for 90 minutes, The Santa Claus with an E was the best movie in the world. If nothing else, it was our last moment of calm before the funeral. You know what people don't tell you about death is that death is exciting. Not happy walking through the gates of Disneyland exciting, but intense, heart pumping, adrenalized exciting, like riding a motorcycle through a crumbling city in the middle of a massive earthquake, only with cookies. Yeah, death also brings cookies. As Elsa and Paul, Gladys's parents, kicked off the ancient, somber machinery of funeral preparation, choosing a mortuary, a coffin, a burial plot, Susan's mom, Mary Evelyn, sent over a big plate of cookies, the first of dozens and dozens of plates of cookies that we would receive between now and Christmas. Christmas. Shit. Gladys technically died at the beginning of the holiday season. Something told me that Christmas in our house was never going to be quite the same. When I called my dad right after Gladys died to tell him, my dad did something that he reserved only for the most sensitive and solemn of occasions. He elected not to tell any stories. Instead, he said the one thing that I most needed to hear from my dad at that moment. Davy, I'll be there tomorrow. You know the sound an airplane makes? Just flying along, just maintaining altitude, just shooting ahead through the clouds and the fog, that weird otherworldly hum an airplane makes. Well, that's what the next few days sounded like. I know a lot of things must have happened, but mostly I remember the hum. My first clear memory is from the day before the funeral. Uh, Elsa, Gladys's mom, was a lifelong Catholic and staunch believer in God, tradition, and the healing power of family gatherings. She pretty much insisted that the kids attend the funeral in the morning and the viewing of the body the night before. Gladys deserves to have her children pay their respects. My dad was with me every step of the way that week with my stepmom Joan at his side. The day of the viewing, they offered to take the kids to the movies to give me a bit of a break. I suggested the Santa Claus with an E. They chose The Lion King. That day, as I was doing whatever it was I needed to do, I was just dreading that evening. The moment when I would stand there with Jenna and Andy in front of the coffin, looking at the body of the woman who used to be their mother, a mother that they never actually had a chance to say goodbye to. I went to the store and got a cheap cassette tape recorder and a couple of blank cassettes. And that night at dinner, just before the viewing, uh, at a Burger King, one of the big ones with the playground and the ball crawl, I gave each kid a blank cassette and told them that if they wanted to, they could record a goodbye message to their mom, and that we would put those tapes in the coffin later on at the viewing when we paid our respects. After some thought, Jenna took the cassette player into a stall in the bathroom where she sang her mom the opening African chant that begins the circle of life, the song at the beginning of The Lion King. Nan sinyama babakitsi baba siti amengunyama nan sinyama babakitsi baba siti amengunyama. Jenna didn't speak Zulu, so she didn't really know what those words meant, but to her, she was singing goodbye. Andy, feeling shy, buried himself in the ball crawl and pulled the cassette player down beneath 1,000 multicolored plastic balls where he whispered his own soft 7-year-old farewell, making sure to catch his mom up on all the news since she left. Andy was trying so hard to understand the bizarre actions of all the adults around him. They were all crying, but they were planning a party. His grandmother was so sad, but people kept sending her flowers, which she usually got on her birthday, which always made her happy. He was listening intently, watching everything, trying to figure out how to say and do whatever it was these confusing people expected of him. But nothing seemed to make any sense, right up to and including the moment of the viewing. Now, Jenna and Andy were used to waiting in line for things, but most of the time they looked forward to reaching the end of the line. As we moved slowly toward the coffin, voices from the folks in front floated back as a long line of mourners each took their turn, looking in at Gladys, a wig now covering the thin, short hair that never had a chance to grow back. Each person offering their own significant whispered word or two. As the voices floated back, some of them said she looked still so beautiful. Others that she looked so at peace, so angelic, so serene, so radiant. When we reached the coffin, the kids peered in for several long seconds before Andy stepped up and took his own crack at saying something significant. She looks so despicable. Despicable. Andy didn't really know what the word meant, but it was a big, thick, chewy grown-up word, and it was the best he could do under pressure. I knew how Andy felt. I had no idea what I was doing. This wasn't anything I'd ever planned for. I didn't know what the rules were for this. What did my kids need? What did I need? Was I allowed to show any emotion? Do ex-husbands get to cry at their ex-wives' funerals? And how much longer were we supposed to stand there? With all eyes on Jenna and Andy, making them feel all that pressure. After a while, they tucked their cassettes into the coffin next to their mom's body. And I led them back to their seats where we sat and watched as everybody else had their turn. It was taking forever. And all that time I was thinking, you know what? This is despicable. It really is. Whatever went wrong between me and Gladys, this is not the last memory I want my kids to have of their mom. When it was finally over, as we were driving away from the parking lot, having made plans to meet back there for the procession to the church in the morning, Jenna started singing softly in her seat beside me. Non se llama Babagitsi Baba. And I had an idea. Who wants ice cream? I turned the truck around and stopped for ice cream before making a left and heading up to the hospital. The hospital where Jenna and Andy were born. In the elevator, I pushed the button for the 3rd floor while the kids stood there clutching their ice cream cones. What was this thing I had about giving the kids sugar before something tricky was going to happen? The elevator doors opened and I led them down the hall and out onto the 3rd floor open air viewing platform. The blinds at the nursery were open. Yes. So we lined up at the window, gazing in at the little rows of cribs. Jen and Andy had no idea why we were there, eating ice cream and watching a bunch of sleeping babies. Now, I'm pretty sure they thought it was a lot better than what I'd just taken them to. I dropped to my knees in between them. So, this kind of makes me think of The Lion King. At the beginning of the movie, Simba is born, right? And all the animals come and they all sing the circle of life. Because everyone gets born. Like these babies. Like you, like Simba. And everyone dies. Like Simba's dad. Like your mom. There are births, and then there are deaths, and then there are more births. There are beginnings and endings, and then more beginnings and more endings. And that is the circle of life. You just saw your mom for the last time. And I wanted you to remember the place where you both saw her for the first time. I have no idea if any of this helped Jen and Andy understand what was going on any better, but it was the best I could do under pressure. The next morning, Susan got the kids into their funeral clothes, chosen by Elsa to reflect the somber tone of the day. The day had started out cold and rainy, but was beginning to clear by the time we all arrived at the church. Elsa pulled me aside out front and asked me if I would consider delivering a eulogy at the service, the one detail she'd forgotten to arrange. The service began in 30 minutes. I seriously considered it for about 5 seconds before deciding that, winging my ex-wife's eulogy was just asking for disaster. I did, however, agree to be one of the pallbearers, helping to carry Gladys into the church. Jenna clung close to the grandparents. Andy stood right by me as the hearse with the casket pulled up to the curb. First, there was a quick pallbearer training session. The funeral director was a portly gentleman with a face permanently fixed between an expression of soberness and seriousness, and kind of a cheerful business like let's just make the best of this expression. He expressed his condolences, gave us a couple of useful tips on the ergonomics of lifting a casket, and showed us a useful diagram of the path we'd take across the sidewalk, up the steps, and into the foyer where a shiny metal gurney on wheels would take Gladys the rest of the way. Andy hovered nearby, watching everything as the pallbearers s- took the casket and slid it out and onto one of those weird funereal coffin launching pad things, and then stood waiting for the signal to begin. Hey, Andy. How you doing, kiddo? You okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I just, I kind of wanted to be a polar bear too. A polar bear. We couldn't help it. All of us big, tall pallbearers standing on the sidewalk, we all started crying. I guess to Andy, the idea of people holding coffins being called polar bears wasn't any weirder than anything else he'd been witnessing. It was obvious that adults were confused about everything. I mean, how many times over the last few months had some adult told him that everything would be fine, that his mom would get better, and everything would be the same again? And maybe it made a kind of a sense for coffin carriers to be called polar bears. I mean, polar bears are tough, right? Polar bears can handle anything. We moved aside and let Andy step in and join us. He reached up to take the handle of the coffin. A few moments later, we got the signal to start, and we lifted and began to walk away from the hearse toward the church. Andy was smiling now, actually beaming as we walked, though tears were rolling down his face. Maybe he was thinking, his little heart broken, that now he could handle this, even this, because broken heart or no broken heart, he was strong enough to take it now. He was tough enough. He was a polar bear. End of Act 1. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. Please meet us back here. I promise funny stuff is going to come back into the story, and you will not want to miss how this ends. So thank you for joining us. See you back in about 5 minutes.
Hi everyone, real life Andy here. If you're just joining us, just a heads up, this is intermission and my dad will come back in about 2 minutes. So make sure that you grab your drinks, you come back from the bathroom because Act 2 is going to be a lot more lively and you'll see a lot of me. Bye.
Okay, welcome back. Act 2 of Polar Bears. We all coped in different ways that first Christmas without Gladys. Jenna spent a lot of time thinking. She had long conversations with the cat. Andy, officially done with the sad stuff now, turned his attention to a Christmas list, Christmas decorations, and Santa Claus. Susan, facing her first holiday season with two grieving kids in the house, focused on food, laundry, and the messy mysteries of pre-adolescent toothbrushing time, and let me take the lead where Christmas was concerned. To that end, I coped by sticking hard to what I knew best. In spite of the sadness hanging over our suddenly very crowded little house, I was determined to make this house, this Christmas, better, happier, more magical than ever. I just didn't know how. Ever since the funeral, friends had been reaching out, sending their love and support, mostly in the form of cookies. By the first weekend in December, our tiny kitchen was overflowing with plates, platters, and ornamental tins crammed with Christmas cookies. Cookies in the shape of stars, Santas, reindeer, and ironically, a fair number of polar bears. Rule number 15. Under certain circumstances, including a sudden urgent need to make everyday activities as special as possible, and a coincidental overabundance of Christmas cookies, gingerbread, shortbread, and snickerdoodles are an acceptable alternative to breakfast cereal. It was extremely important, I realized, that the kids be taken to the mall to see Santa as soon as possible. Now, a lot of people won't admit this, but the real purpose of shopping mall Santas is not to fill the lives of kids with wonder and joy. It's to provide parents with a reasonable, feasible mechanism for determining what it is their kids want Santa to bring them on Christmas morning. Letters to Santa? Not reliable. For one thing, some parents just aren't comfortable opening mail not addressed to them. It's easier to just plop your kid on Santa's lap and pretend to be staring at the Victoria's Secret display while eavesdropping on the conversation between your kid and the guy in the beard. The day that Susan and I took Jen and Andy to the mall, as we were waiting in line, I was filled with this rush of emotion. watching my kids' faces, my kids who just lost so much, as they stared in varying degrees of wonder through the little picket fence that separated us from Santa Claus. On the spot, I invented rule number 16. If your mom dies just before Christmas, anything you ask Santa for, you get. 20 minutes later, I added an amendment to rule number 16. If your kid's mom dies just before Christmas, don't be surprised if they ask for something no shopping mall Santa has the authority to agree to. Andy went first. He asked for a horse. Jenna, uh, possibly remembering the day that Santa or someone sent her on a magical treasure hunt adventure, her cognitive development wrestling hard with her childlike desire to believe that anything is possible, hopped up into Santa's lap and gazed hopefully into his big bearded face. Hello, Santa. Good afternoon. You probably remember me. I'm Jenna. I assume you've heard that my mom died. So here's what I'm thinking. I don't really need any presents this year, but if you can make my mom alive again, then you can give all my presents to some other little girl. Deal? The surprising thing about Santa's reaction is that Santa didn't seem all that surprised. Evidently, when you ask hundreds of kids a day what they want more than anything in the world, having one or two ask for a mom back from the grave or a dad home from prison is a strong statistical possibility. No, I'm sorry for your loss. But your mother is an angel in heaven now, and I'm just not allowed to take angels out of heaven. Heaven needs them all too much. Would it be all right if I just brought you a horse? Jenna agreed to the horse. But she never really believed in Santa again. On the way home, we stopped for a Christmas tree, and with our glistening new Douglas fir in the back of the pickup, we then headed to Maurice's Fantasia for an angel for the top of our tree. Maurice's Christmas Fantasia is where everyone in town always went for their Christmas decorations. If Santa's village could be condensed into a single storefront wonderland, Maurice's Fantasia would be it. Dozens and dozens of trees stood here and there throughout the multi-storied shop, each one an explosion of ornaments, each with its own distinct kind of theme. Santa's Village, the Nutcracker, Pirates of the Caribbean, each with its own unique tree topper, stars, pirates, angels. Now, I don't remember if it was Jenna or Andy who suggested that we should pick up an angel that looked like their mom, but it didn't take us long to find one that both kids agreed was just about perfect. The place was really hopping that day, very packed. So we stood in line, slowly moving toward the counter where a cashier in a flowing dress and an exuberantly multicolored scarf on her head, like a tarot reader from the Renaissance fair, was taking her time with all the customers, laughing, asking questions. We finally made it to the counter and passed over the angel. Oh, this one is my favorite. I see she speaks to you too. The cashier wasn't talking to me or to Susan. She was talking to Jenna and Andy. Jenna explained that the angel was their mother, who had just died of cancer and was now living in heaven. She just stared for a few seconds. Before we knew what was happening, the cashier had moved out from behind the counter, dropped to her knees in front of the kids, and enfolded them in her arms. Then, with a big, bright smile, she reached up and pulled off her scarf, which fluttered away, revealing her beautiful, completely hairless head. I've been going through chemo myself the last few months, and who knows, maybe I'll be an angel myself someday. But I think that if I were lucky enough to be the mother to two sweet and thoughtful children like you, then I would be proud to be a beautiful angel like this one, watching over you from my place on the tree. Rule number 17. Until further notice, at Christmas, this angel goes up on our tree. Now, Susan, through it all, was a trooper, evolving as quickly as possible to accommodate all those changes that were piling up alongside all those cookies, which seemed to just keep coming as we got closer to Christmas. Convincing her to accept the Santa rules, that took some doing, especially the one requiring us to hold off putting presents under the tree until the kids are deep, deep, deep asleep. Kids don't actually fall asleep on Christmas Eve. At the newspaper, Roberto was happy as ever to keep writing the cards and gift tags intended as correspondence from Santa. And on Christmas Eve, with Susan's help, the illusion and magical manifestation of Santa's midnight arrival was carried out with crack efficiency and an admirable amount of grace. In the morning, the tree with the Gladys angel securely in her place was absolutely beautiful. And the number of presents under the tree was staggering. The family had been especially generous that year. And when Jenna and Andy awoke, the sharp sting of their recent loss was briefly buried under the glittering mountain of presents and tinsel and toys that awaited them. And what did Santa bring Jenna and Andy that Christmas? Horses. You know, it's funny. A week later, on New Year's Day, as we all sat around the kitchen table while Andy and Jenna wrote out their thank you notes, they included, at Andy's insistence, a thank you to Santa Claus. Kind of ironic, isn't it? For years, I'd been busting my butt so that the kids could believe in Santa until they were ready to stop. I'd been so afraid of failing at fatherhood that I'd committed myself, heart and soul, to a plan in which another guy, let's face it, an imaginary guy, was getting all the credit for all the stuff I was doing, the magical things I was bringing them. Susan said it was my guy side, the side that says there's nothing broken that can't be fixed through sheer muscle effort and blindly hoping for the best. She may not have said it quite so nicely. As the next few weeks went by, we adjusted, bumping along as best we could. With Christmas over and the cookies having finally stopped coming, I had to start serving the kids actual food for breakfast. Fortunately, I make great grilled cheese sandwiches. I quit my job at the newspaper, swapping the swing shift for a part-time morning job at a smaller paper so I could be home with the kids in the afternoon after school when they needed me. And Susan, well, Turns out Susan had never thought of herself as mother material. As hard as our new life was on me and Jenna and Andy, it was probably hardest on her. Still, that July, about as far from Christmas as the calendar could take us, under a tree in her brother's backyard, Susan married me. The kids participated in the ceremony, bringing in baskets of flower petals and then standing under the multicolored snowstorm as Susan and I showered them with petals. And then life went on. Whenever things got complicated, I'd call my dad, he'd tell me some stories, I'd pick up a crumb or two of fatherly wisdom and keep going, just doing whatever I could do the best way I know how. And through it all, in the back of my head, of course, I was waiting for the next Christmas. But when fall came, with Thanksgiving right around the corner, as the shops began to fill again with holiday decorations, the season brought with it this sense of sadness and gloom hanging over everything, blocking the Christmas spirit the way clouds block the sun. The whole month of November had become layered with the hard, sharp heaviness of loss. And it didn't help that Buddy, the cat, had recently taken a stroll across the street at the wrong moment. After burying him in the backyard, I decided I needed to do something to elevate the mood. To mark the soon to arrive first anniversary of Gladys's death by doing something upbeat, or at least something significant. So that year, we established a new tradition, one we would continue for years to come. We huddled together in the living room, ate really good chocolate, and watched The Santa Claus with a C, now officially our family's favorite Christmas movie. Oh, and what did Santa bring Jenna and Andy that year? A brand new, empty, unwrapped cat carrier with a note from Santa with a little help from Roberto. Dear Andy and Jenna, I know it's been a hard year, but I am so proud of you both. Jenna, congratulations on that A+ on your science test. Have you ever considered becoming an astronaut? And Andy, you have been working very hard on doing your chores on time. That makes me, Santa, very, very happy. I am very sorry that Buddy the cat died. Here is a cat carrier. So your dad can take you to the pound to pick out a new cat. I hope the new cat is very nice to you because you both deserve a nice cat very, very much. Please don't let him go out in the street. Merry Christmas, Mr. C. The next year, when November rolled in, it brought with it that same horrible sense of gloom. So once again, we found ourselves gathered in the living room with chocolate and popcorn, watching The Santa Claus with an E. There was a strange kind of comfort in that ritual. If nothing else, it felt good to just sit and laugh together. The exploding turkey and the elves with attitude were always reliably hilarious. And even Santa's death at the beginning of the movie was beginning to seem kind of funny. Not to everyone, but Andy, that is. Andy's strongly identified with the character of Charlie in the movie, the little boy who refuses to stop believing that his father has become the new Santa Claus. For years, Andy's favorite book had been The Polar Express. He read it over and over again, savoring every word, especially the ending, where the narrator, once a little boy, now all grown up, admits that he still believes, that he alone can hear the ringing of the magic sleigh bell. By then, Andy was writing these long letters to Santa, not just lists of toys that he wanted on Christmas, but actual letters telling Santa about everything going on in his life. Dear Santa, school is hard. Tests are stupid. I played a dog in the school talent show, and every joke I told was funny. It's almost Christmas, and I still believe in you, even though some of the kids at school say you are not real. They are stupid. Some of them say believing in Santa is not cool, but I think you are cool. I prayed to God once and asked him to keep my mom from dying, and she died anyway. But every year when I write and ask for something, you always bring it to me, or you bring me something almost as good as what I asked for. So I know you are real. This year, please bring me a Harry Potter magic set and a trip to Disneyland. I love you, Santa. See you soon. Your friend, Andy. Jenna, meanwhile, was feeling the pressure to stay in the Santa closet. I mean, she'd pretty much stopped believing, but she was afraid to hang that out there, especially at home with all the Santa energy in the house. Besides, what if she was wrong? From Susan, she picked up some tips about the scientific method. So that year, she devised a deviously ingenious test to determine once and for all if Santa really existed. She secretly wrote a letter to Santa. She asked for a puppy. She secretly mailed that letter on her way home from school. Then she wrote another letter from Santa, one she never intended to mail, one intended only for me. Dad, please send to Santa. You can read if you want to. Dear Santa, I don't know if you are real, though Dad says you are. If you are real, well, then I would appreciate it if you would prove it. Please bring me something that doesn't come from China or Korea or even America. Something that could only have come from your workshop at the North Pole. I don't actually care what it is. A wooden dinosaur or something. Whatever. Just bring me something my dad couldn't have bought in a store. Merry Christmas. Respectfully yours, Jenna. Rule number 18. Santa must never bring gifts from China or Korea or even America. All gifts from Santa must plausibly have been made by elves in a workshop at the North Pole. I visited 3 farmers markets, 6 toy stores, and 2 craft fairs before finding the perfect wooden dinosaur. It was made by a retired carpenter who sold toys at outdoor markets on weekends. It was carved out of unfinished pine. It had no markings, no labels, just wood, wheels, and teeth. On Christmas morning, when Jenna came into the room and saw that little wooden dinosaur sitting on the bricks of the fireplace, and no puppies anywhere, I could tell by the look on her face that something had changed. It wasn't the look of a child receiving what she'd hoped on Christmas. It was something else. It was a young lady receiving the final confirmation of something she'd long suspected. Jenna finally knew for certain. She understood. It was her time. Jenna was 10 years old, and she was officially over Santa Claus. Yes! I did it. Ah, I did it. One of my kids believed in Santa 6 whole years longer than I did. And Andy, he did even better than that. Andy believed in Santa until he was 11, and then 12, and then 13. As Andy turned 14 on the 4th of July, he was still looking forward to Santa's next arrival in December, even though, and he was fully aware of this, he was now the only soon to be high schooler that he knew. For years, I had followed the Santa rules religiously, meticulously making sure I did nothing to spoil the illusion. But honestly, as Jenna and then each of Andy's friends, one by one, stopped believing, stepped out of the Santa closet, I'd begun to wonder if maybe my commitment to keeping the magic of Christmas alive had maybe backfired. To give Andy a gentle hint, I had reluctantly started relaxing on some of the Santa rules, stopping with the boots in the garden and then the ceremonial flushing of the leftover cookies that Andy still faithfully left out for Santa every 24th of December. Eventually, I dispensed with everything but the Santa gift itself. And through it all, Andy kept on believing. And now he was 14. What did that magazine article say? Those psychologists said that most kids stop believing in Santa between 7.5 and 11. Wow. Andy had just joined the unsung ranks of the all-time Santa believing world champions. The question is, had I given my kids a wonderful, incredible, beautiful gift? Or had I committed some sort of bizarrely Christmassy accidental child abuse? At that point, it didn't matter. There was nothing I could do about it because all by himself, Andy had developed his own list of Santa rules. Rule number 1, when kids stop believing in Santa, Santa stops believing in them. Rule number 2, if parents insist on pretending to be Santa and leaving gifts in his name, then Santa stops visiting that house because those kids are taken care of. Rule number 3, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you still believe, Santa will never abandon you. I had visions of myself at age 50, 60, 70, still doing this. That November, by which point we had watched The Santa Claus with an E so many times that the VHS tape had actually worn out. My dad called up to check in. I just told him everything. I caught him up on my work at the newspaper where I was getting more and harder writing assignments. I talked about my obviously somewhat dubious parenting skills, the whole Santa rules thing, Andy believing in Santa as a freshman in high school, all of it. My dad listened without judgment. And then, Davy, is funny, you talking about rules. I remember when you were just a little thing, you, Stevie, and Jeffy, no taller than a yardstick. Your mom used to follow all the rules. She kept you clean as a whistle, kept you out of harm's way, made sure you were tidy and safe. And then you started coming down with colds. She told the doctor it doesn't make any sense that these boys are getting sick because I've been following all the rules. I remember the doctor saying, the only thing these boys need is to stop being so clean. You should let them get out in the dirt some, build a resistance. So I went out in the backyard with a shovel and I dug a big hole. I got out the garden hose and I filled the hole with water. And when the dirt turned to mud, I brought you boys out, told you to take off all your clothes and just have a little fun. Well, at the end of the day, you were covered in mud from top to bottom and happier than pigs in slop. You pretty much stopped getting colds right away. The thing is, Davy, there really aren't any rules. Oh, we think there are. We try, but with being a parent or being an adult or playing Santa, the only rule that really matters is that we love our kids the way it makes the most sense to at the moment. And Santa Claus, all Santa ever was a way to show our kids that we are happiest when they're happy. The day I told Andy the truth about Santa Claus was one of the hardest days of my life. When I told the kids that their mom had just died, at least then I'd had a moment to plan. At least then I'd brought truffles. We were all together one afternoon, and suddenly, out of the blue, Andy told me that at school he'd told a friend that he still believed in Santa. That friend told some other kids, and pretty soon they were all teasing Andy, taunting him for still believing. So he told them he was only kidding. He knew Santa wasn't real. And then he looked at me as if I alone would understand what he'd just been through. And with a hint of pride at his clever use of deception with those kids, he told me that he didn't care what they believed or what they said. He still believed. He would always believe that Santa was real. I knew right then that the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when Andy was ready to stop believing all on his own, was never going to happen. Not without a bit of a push. Uh, Andy, um, speaking of Santa Claus, I have some bad news. The thing is, the truth is that Santa Claus is actually me. I mean, I'm not Santa Claus, like in the Santa Claus with an E. I mean, there really is no Santa Claus exactly. I mean, I'm the one who's been leaving the boot prints. I've been eating the cookies. I'm sorry if I'm just sorry. I just wanted you to have the magic that I never had. You did all of that? You left the clues in the treasure hunt? You you left all those letters and the presents? Why why would you do that? Why would I play Santa? Because I want you to be happy. No. No. Why would you lie to me the way Mom did when she said she'd get better? Why would anyone do that? I really didn't have an answer for him. Not one that Andy would understand at the moment. He hadn't cried that hard since Gladys died. But that afternoon, as I sat there helpless, Andy cried like a little boy who just lost his mother. Rule number 19. A strict adherence to the Santa rules does not guarantee success. In fact, even then, on some occasions, you could end up breaking someone's heart. I had just broken my kid's heart for the second time. And you know what? There's nothing really that unusual about that. Parents break their kids' hearts all the time. Kids break their parents' hearts all the time. And then somehow we help each other heal. Love is the stuff that holds the cracks together. Sounds like something my dad would say. The thing is, when Andy lost Santa Claus, so did I. I never played Santa again. So, how did I deal with that? I was covering a film festival for my newspaper when spontaneously I asked the filmmaker that I was interviewing if he remembered how old he was when he stopped believing in Santa Claus. I don't even know why I asked the question, but instead of looking at me funny, this grizzled old filmmaker just said, "Now that is a moment I will never forget." And then he told me his story. He was 10 years old, living in Boston. It was 2 days before Christmas. He was standing at a bus stop with his parents out in front of a bar. All of a sudden, the doors of the bar swung open. He looked inside, and there was Santa Claus, one of the Salvation Army kind, sitting at the end of the counter. Santa didn't see the kid. He pulled his beard down, lifted a shot glass, and tossed back a slug of whiskey. Then he let the beard snap back into place. And then he saw the kid. The whole bar saw the kid. And 50 years later, this professional filmmaker with an Oscar nomination still remembered that moment, seeing that room full of adults see his 10-year-old face fall as the truth about Santa clicked into place. Hearing that story, something clicked for me too. And from then on, whenever I was interviewing somebody interesting, I try to slip in the question, how old were you when you stopped believing in Santa? Robin was 6 years old. He said that it just dawned on him that Santa probably wouldn't be wrapping his presents in newspaper, and poof, there went Santa. Bo was the son of a famous musician, comedian, actor. He told me about the time his dad reluctantly admitted that all those times he'd taken Bo up on the roof of their house to see the boot prints from Santa, that he'd left those prints himself. Bo told me he was pretty angry for a while until it dawned on him that his dad was actually pretty old to be climbing a ladder up onto the roof just to make the Christmas presents a little more magical. Julie was 11. In her house, Santa didn't just leave presents, he left everyone a poem, handwritten. Eventually, Julie recognized her mother's handwriting, a classic blunder. Well, when she had kids of her own, guess what? Santa started leaving poems for them too, typewritten in red ink. What I learned is that Andy is not alone. Over the years, I've met other people who believed as long as Andy did, some even more. And for every Andy who stretches out their belief in Santa beyond that of their friends and siblings, for everyone who pushes the envelope of average cognitive awareness, there are thousands of others who maybe never got to believe as long as they deserve to. Who says that magic has to have an expiration date? Jenna and Andy are all grown up now. They don't have any kids of their own, but maybe someday. Recently, I asked them what they'll tell their kids about Santa if the time comes, and they both told me the same thing. They have no idea. They'll figure it out when they get there. Till then, the best I can offer them as advice is this story. The story of how, when I thought I had nothing to give, I just gave the best I had. And somehow, we all made it through. because that's what people do. Santa or no Santa, broken hearts or no broken hearts, through losses, lies, and the beautiful backfires that come from simply loving one another, sometimes we discover that we're strong enough to take it. We're tough enough. We're polar bears. End of play. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing this story with me. This is really fun. I really appreciate having had the last few weeks of reabsorbing this story again. It's been a long time, and it's really been a sweet time. And I'm glad some of you were here to be able to share this moment. So thank you so much. I believe this is new technology for me, but I believe that this and the earlier show at 4 o'clock are going to be archived on this this YouTube channel of mine. So until I decide to take them down for some reason, they're going to be there. So if you know someone you think that would like to hear this story, please send them in this direction so that the story can continue to keep giving. All right. Thank you so much. Happy holidays. Love to all of you. And thank you so much for sharing this time. Thanks to Andy, who's right there. He's been on book, helped me. This was a lot to memorize in just a few weeks. So it was nice to have him as the safety net. And I appreciate everyone who gave me advice and helped out with this technical stuff. Joe Wicks, by the way, shout out to the great Joe Wicks, who helped me set up all the technical side of this. That was awesome. All right. I'm going to have have a mug of eggnog or something. And I will hopefully see you later. Hope you enjoyed this time. Thank you. Merry Christmas.